I'm Leon Lovelace, and this is Unstoppable Force. Now, I need your help. I need you to go to my PayPal. I'll put a link in the description box below, and I'll put it on here so you could go there and donate to my channel so I could expand this channel. But I want to talk to you guys about my job a little bit, because I just started it. But what I do is I install insulation for houses. And the biggest gripe I have about this job is that the houses that we're building and we're installing insulation in, all these new houses that are getting built, they're all about all these suburbs in the area of Jacksonville, North Carolina, and close to Wilmington, Holly Ridge area. But a lot of it is that the building companies, they're chopping down all these forests in these areas of eastern North Carolina, and then they're building houses in those areas where it used to be forest. That's my biggest gripe, is that they're doing a lot of fucking deforestation and doing a lot of destruction to our natural wildlife to create homes for people. And that's not what's necessarily what's needed, because of course these companies could just build apartment places and start building up a lot more than just building out, because that's one issue that not just places in the United States, but just areas all across the world, is we're just having way too much deforestation, and that's destroying way too much wildlife, especially with the animal agriculture. But I guess housing development also does that too, because I didn't really think about that before I started this job. And that's not really the fault of our company per se, but I think a lot of that is the issues with the city councils and whichever governments are approving these companies to start building more suburbs and just expanding the suburbs to make them a lot larger and larger and larger over the course of years and years, especially in places that are growing in population. So that's my big issue with this job. And then I was going to one of the jobs that me and my coworker was going to on Friday. We drove through a few small towns. One was Maysville, another one was Pollocksville, and you could just see the just obvious poverty and just the state of low income and just a lower socioeconomic class that lives in the rural areas. Because you drive by and you just see a bunch of just beat up and fucking just ratty old houses and just beat up old structures. And you just look and just driving and not seeing that very much, and then seeing it in these small towns. You look and you just say, well, how can we, or what can people do to make the people's lives that live in these rural areas in these small towns better? Because since these towns are so small, they don't have big corporations that are paying out or have good paying jobs in those small towns, because they're so small that there's not really any income there to support corporations that do that. So I'm just thinking to myself, as we're driving through all these small towns, I'm thinking, well, since the cities or these small town governments probably aren't going to have the tax revenue to kind of invest in the people in the area, what's probably going to need to be done is the states are going to have to step in and say, okay, for these people in these rural areas, what we're going to do is we're going to start investing in them. We're going to put money to rebuilding all these old and just shitty houses and rebuild them for people, make them real nice and structurally sound. Then what we could do is we could also subsidize people's houses, at least pay partial amount of the rent for all these lower income people, for the poor working class people in these rural communities. And if they're and if people are renting them, state governments could say, you know what we're going to do is we're going to buy up some of these homes and some of these trailers in these rural areas. We're going to build new ones, or at least we're going to refurbish the ones that are there that are in decent condition, and then we can rent to people, or we could rent them out to these residents at a fair price or a low price, so they're subsidized, so people have nice homes, and that's how the state could provide affordable housing to people in the rural areas. Because for cities, it's a little bit different because the city government can do it, but in rural areas, I think the state would really have to step up and provide for people some quality housing so people can have a higher standard of living. And then there are some cities in North Carolina that are among the poorest cities too, because right here in the Newsroom Observer, they talk about how Goldsboro is a poor city in the country. Because right here it says, in a 2015 national study found Goldsboro to be the fifth poorest city in America. Stanford University's mobility studies concluded that 95% of the country's metropolitan areas had better economic mobility rates than Goldsboro. The Pew Research Center determined in 2016 that the last decade brought the city a 26% drop in median income and huge losses in middle income and employment. Both figures are among the very worst the country has experienced. And just having this news channel and reading some more about the income levels of people that live in cities, it also looks like a lot of these companies and a lot of these newspapers and media outlets are kind of trying to hide the poverty that people are experiencing in the United States, because I'm seeing they all use median income. And median income is just the middle. That's not the average or the per capita income of residents in a certain city or some of these states. Usually not counties, because that's usually not how we organize the income information, but especially in cities, they always use median. Never per capita or never just the average income. Because I think they really want to try to hide to a large segment of the population that about 50% of the U.S. population makes less than $30,000 a year. Okay, but let's continue. Over 25% of Goldsboro residents live in poverty. 40% of all kids are poor. Over half of African American children. In some census tracts we studied, 65% of kids were impoverished. And Goldsboro has nearly the worst racially driven concentrated poverty in North Carolina. So to fix that, a few corporations are not going to be able to fix the racially driven poverty in Goldsboro. It's got to be a lot of people in Goldsboro saying, you know what, we've had it with this shit. The Goldsboro city government is going to have to really fix this racism problem. Maybe even the state might need to come in and help make sure that the city's not driving black and brown people into poverty. Because we've had this fucking shit. We're done. We're tired of it. It's time to force these governments. It's time to force these governments to make sure they work for everybody and not just the white folks. Let's see. Alright, let's continue again. Safe, affordable housing is a gigantic problem. A full-time working single mom story was typical. All she could afford was a housing authority, and it's terrible and dangerous, and there are gunshots all the time. Ambulances and police are always here, she said. She wishes there was a porch or backyard where her children could play safely, but that's not possible. I'll skip down a little bit. Once home to Lowe's, Northwest Bank, Holly Farms, Carolina Mirror, and North Wilkesboro Speedway, the county was ravaged by NAFTA. And this is Wilkes County, where Goldsboro is located in. Median income, there they go again with that fucking median income and not per capita income or the average income. Median income dropped by nearly 30% over 15 years. In the late 1990s, the unemployment rate was a remarkable 2%. A decade later, it soared to over 13%. Half of all Wilkes households now make under $30,000. A quarter of its 69,000 residents live in poverty, a third of all children. There are today 5,000 fewer private sector jobs than existed in 1995. Twice as many folks live in mobile homes as the state average. Disability, overdose, and addiction rates are high. Almost 90% of the county population is white. Maybe for some of you that don't live in the South and you haven't seen or been in that many mobile homes. When the mobile homes are brand new, they're an okay structure to live in, but when they get a little bit older, that 20 or so years, they start really falling apart and they start turning to shit. Because they're not really engineered to be a strong structure that could last for 100 years. They're only kind of good for like 20 or so years, and then you really need to scrap them and build another one. And I guess it's also a little bit cheaper for some of these housing areas when they want to house poor people in. It's just a little cheaper around here to use mobile homes over apartment complexes, because there's not really that many, especially when you get outside of the cities. When you get to just the suburbs and the smaller areas outside the city, it's all mobile homes for all the poor and working class housing around here. So yeah, it kind of sucks. And then you got to also notice that after all these big industries or these big corporations left because of NAFTA, also notice that none of these or other big corporations didn't come in and say, okay, well, all these people are losing all these good income jobs and these are skilled employees, so we could go in and make some money over in Wilkes County, so this is going to be good for our business. No, that shit's not really happening. Companies are just leaving. No other companies are coming in to give these citizens in this city, in Goldsboro, good paying jobs. So what the government should be doing is providing jobs for these citizens here in Goldsboro. But since they don't represent the people, they haven't been doing that.